Paper Crafter's Library. In this video, I want to introduce you to the Silhouette Cameo. It's Silhouette's newest machine and it replaces their Silhouette SD. So here you can see what their old machine looks like. This is the Silhouette SD and how the Silhouette Cameo sizes in comparison. So with the Silhouette SD, you used to only be able to cut materials up to an 8.5 inch width. With the Silhouette Cameo, you can now cut materials up to a 12-inch width. Now the Silhouette SD is no longer available for purchase, but for those people that still have it, the cutting mats and blades are still going to be made available. So for those of you that have heard the name Cameo but aren't sure what it is, it's an electronic cutting tool which was designed for home use. Similar to a printer, it will hook into your PC or Mac using a simple USB cable, but instead of printing, it uses a small blade to cut your designs out of a wide variety of materials. So you can obviously cut things like paper and cardstocks with it, but in addition to that, there's a wide variety of other materials that you can cut, such as vinyl, and this is an example of one that I bought from Silhouette. You can cut fabric, pretty much anything that's up to about a 0.8 millimeter thickness. Now this is really important to keep in mind because you're not going to be able to cut things like chipboard. Here you can see an example of a heavier weight chipboard or backboard. You're also not going to be able to cut through grunge board. This is a product sold by Tim Holtz, which is quite trendy right now. And I also find that it doesn't work very well with window sheets, the thicker ones. This is an example of one of the window sheets that's sold by Basil. So always keep in the forefront of your mind what materials this can and can't cut. I love the fact that the Cameo allows me to cut amazingly intricate designs in sizes from a 1/4 inch wide to 12 inches wide with an unlimited length. So here you can see an example of a greeting that I die cut, and you can see how fine some of the sides are, and this isn't even as intricate as this machine can go. Now you can replace the blade with a pen, allowing you to create sketches instead of cuts. And here you can see some of the sketch pens that Silhouette sells. They have a nice range of colors as well as some metallic colors that you can use. Another nice feature about the Cameo is that it has a built-in print and cut feature, which allows you to print designs on your home computer and then use the Cameo to cut them out. And here you can see an example of that. I printed this out using my Canon printer onto some nice textured paper from Basil, and then I cut it out using my Silhouette. One of the real pros about the Cameo, like its predecessor, is that you don't have to purchase cartridges. When you purchase the machine, it will come with 51 designs, and then you can purchase individual designs from their online store through the Silhouette Studio software. And they're really affordably priced, ranging anywhere from about 99 cents to $2.99 for their fonts. The beauty of this machine, though, is that you don't have to buy images from their store. You can use the fonts you already have on your computer. You can create designs in their studio software, and you can even create your own images and designs or import other digital images you already own. Now, one of the things I really like about the Cameo is how compact it is. It's almost 30 inches long, about 5 inches wide, and 6.5 inches high. And weight-wise, it's only 6.5 pounds, so it's very lightweight, doesn't take a lot of space on my table. Of course, when it's actually in use, you want to make sure that you're going to have at least 12 inches of space behind it, and you want to make sure you keep the area in front of your machine clear. Otherwise, when you're not using it, it just tucks away very nicely. When you pull your Cameo and its accessories out of the box, you should have the following. Your Cameo, you should have a power cable, a USB cable. It's not very long, so if your computer is further away from where you're going to be keeping your Cameo, you could always purchase a longer one. There is the blade, and this black part is where the housing where the blade is, and then there's also the ratchet cap, which is this gray piece. You're going to find a cutting mat, which accommodates up to 12 by 12 sized papers. You're going to find a basic instructional guide, a couple of CDs. One of them is the Silhouette Studio software CD. Now you can also download this from the site as well, so if you lose this and for whatever reason need to reinstall it on your computer, you can find it on the site. And then there's a basic instructional video with some very simple guidelines on your Cameo. And then you're also going to get this $10 download card, which allows you to purchase up to $10 of downloads from the Silhouette online store. So the first thing you're going to want to do as soon as you unpack your Cameo is to install the software on your computer. So you can use the disk for that, the Silhouette Studio software disk, and there's instructions in the basic instruction guide on page 2 telling you how to install it for both a PC and a Mac. Now of course you can also install it from the site itself. Now one thing that I do want to mention, while this Silhouette Studio software is great and obviously it's free, if you want to be able to do more, like import your own SVG designs, create your own rhinestone templates, you may want to consider upgrading to the Silhouette Studio Designer Edition software. It's about $50 to do that, but it gives you a whole world of other options that you can't do when you're working with the free Silhouette Studio software. Very easy to upgrade. You can do that online, or wherever you purchased your Cameo may have the license cards that you can purchase from them. Now, as soon as you've installed the software onto your computer, you're going to want to go to the Silhouette store and set up an account in their online store, because that way you can use the $10 download card that came with your Cameo to get started purchasing some new designs. Now while you're there, I also recommend that you register your Cameo, because it does come with a 1-year parts and labor warranty. Now to do that, you're going to need the serial number, and if you flip your machine over on its back, you can see right here is where the serial number is. Now once everything is set up on the computer end of things, you're then going to need to remove the foam and tape that's on your machine. You're going to find a couple of pieces of blue tape on either side, which is what holds the top down. There's also going to be a piece here. Now be very careful when you're removing the piece of tape that's here. You'll be able to pull some of it from this side, but then to open the remainder, you may need to open the top of your machine. The portion of the machine that you see here, which is what's going to hold the blade and the sketch pen and do the cutting and sketching, is going to be on this side of the machine. And there's going to be foam underneath that. You may need to use this blue lever to sort of lift and lower your roller bar a little to help you take that foam out. Now the next thing you're going to want to do is to take your power cord, and you're also going to need your USB cable. If you look at your machine, now if you are facing the machine the way I'm positioned with my machine, the place to plug in the power cord is going to be on the right side, as you can see here. You're going to see 3 holes. The one near the very back is where you're going to take your power cord and plug it in. The next one, and they also have little symbols here, and the next one is where you're going to plug in your USB cable. Now if you look at your USB cable, there's 2 ends. This end, the narrower one, is going to go into your computer, and this end is going to get placed in the machine, and you just have to make sure that it's oriented correctly. And then this slot is for the SD slot. Now, once you have it plugged into your computer, we still have to adjust the rollers and we have to place the blade. So make sure you keep the power off. So the next thing we're going to look at is the roller bar. Now you can see the roller bar consists of this long metal shaft, and then it has these 2 plastic white rollers. The plastic white rollers have a thinner end and a thicker end, and at the end of this thick side it has some grips which hold it in place along the bar in some channels. And there's one channel there, there's another one underneath here, and you can see a couple more channels here. And this allows you to adjust the width of your surface to accommodate different width of materials that you want to cut. Now it's controlled by this blue lever. When it's in the upright position, this is locked in place. When you turn it towards you, it releases this side of the bar, allowing you to adjust this white roller cap. Now when the machine is in use, when you're actually planning on cutting or sketching with it, you do want to make sure that this little blue handle is in the upright or locked position. So I'm now going to show you a closer look at how you adjust the size of these roller bars. So first thing you want to do when you want to adjust the white rollers on your main metal shaft, you want to make sure that your lever is downwards so that the bar is released. Now I find it very helpful to grip the bar with my one hand, and then you're just going to grasp it and you're going to very carefully twist it. So that if you can see here, these little white pieces are now no longer clicked into the grooves. So it's not being held in place. So you can now take your roller bar or your white roller and you can slide it. And you can slide it to whatever width you'd like. So here you can see we've got another channel all the way down to this side. And then to make sure it's secured in place again, you're just going to grasp your bar. This time I'm grasping my bar with my right hand and I'm just twisting until this clicks in place. And you can see now, even if I'm trying to slide it back and forth, I can't, it's not going anywhere. So then once again, to change it, just grip your bar and then twist it until these little white pieces slide out of the grooves. So if you're cutting with your 12 by 12 cutting mat, you're going to want to make sure that this white roller bar that's on the right side is secured as far as it can go here, and then that's going to give you your width for your cutting mat. So the next thing we're going to look at is the blade. Now, with your Cameo, you're going to get the blade, which is already in this black housing, and this gray ratchet cap. This is different than the blade system that was with the Silhouette SD. Here's what the blade system for the Silhouette SD looks like. And if you notice, here there's just the one piece and the ratchet cap, and along the base of this plastic housing you can see these numbers. These numbers are how you adjust the depth of your blade based on the thickness of the material you're cutting. The ratchet cap is used to help adjust that, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. With the Silhouette SD, it was different. There was this housing which held the blade, and then there were these three separate caps. There was the pink, the blue, the yellow, and which cap you use depends on the depth of the material that you're using. Now, the disadvantage to this system is that because you're screwing these caps on and off, you can break the housing, and that has happened a couple of times, and it's expensive to replace. You have to buy everything together. You can't just buy the cap, you can't just buy the housing. Now, with your Silhouette Cameo, the replacement looks like this. It's the blade along with the ratchet cap all in one piece. And I recommend when you buy your Cameo, it's always a good idea to buy a blade. A blade's going to last you probably about 100 cuts, but when you start to notice things are getting a little bit dull or your edges aren't as crisp, you're not going to want to have to wait to use your machine until you order another blade or run out and buy another blade. So I always recommend buy another blade when you buy your machine. So now when you're looking at the blade itself, as I mentioned, the numbers here are for the depth marking of the blade depending on which material you're planning on using it with. In the basic instructional guide that came with your machine on page 9, there is a table that gives you different blade settings based on the materials. So what I do want to tell you though is take this with a little bit of a grain of salt because you may have to adjust the settings depending on what material you're using. For example, it says 2 to 3 for medium weight material such as paper, cardstock, and flocked heat transfer material. Most cardstocks I have found I get the best cut when I use my blade setting at around 4. So it may take a little bit of experimentation, and I always recommend when you're doing your first cut, don't do it on something on your finished project or your finished piece. Do it on a scrap piece of paper, test it out, see how it works. Now when you're actually sending your image to your machine to be cut, so from your computer, there is going to be a place where you're going to enter what material you're cutting, and it will tell you what setting you should set your blade at. Again, you can change that in the computer itself. Now, whatever setting you end up cutting at, you're going to have to set your blade at. So what you want to be aware of is here at the bottom white portion, this is where the blade is housed, in that little hole that you see right there. This red line denotes what depth setting the blade is at. To change the depth setting, you're going to need to use this little ratchet. Now the ratchet has two sides. It has this smooth circular side, and then here you're going to see it has this little notched side. The notches on the inside of the ratchet cap are going to align with the notches on the blade. On the ratchet cap, there's also going to be an arrow, and you want to make sure that that arrow is aligned with the red line on your blade, like so, and then you're going to slide your ratchet cap on. The arrow is going to denote which of these numbers you end up at. So if you want to be at 6, you turn it until the arrow is aligned with 6, you remove the ratchet cap, you see that's where the red line is. Now, if you lose your ratchet cap, the machine actually comes with a built-in ratchet cap, and I'm just going to tilt my machine so you can take a look at that. On the ratchet cap there is an arrow, so you want to make sure again that the red line on this white piece is aligned with the arrow. You just insert it and then you grasp it and turn it to get to whatever blade depth you need to, and then once it's adjusted you pull it out, and that's when we're ready to place it inside the portion of the machine that's going to hold the blade or sketch pen. Now you see that there's this little blue dial here. On the front of it, which you can't see from this view, there's an open and close with directional arrows. To insert your blade, you want to make sure that it's open. So you're going to turn it counterclockwise. So this part here is going to be facing towards the left. You're then going to take your housing piece, and if you look closely, you'll see that on one side it has this black piece that's sticking out. You want to make sure that that is facing towards you, or it's facing towards this little groove here. I then like to grip my blade piece as I slide my blade in, and you want to make sure that it slides down as far as it goes. You'll notice if you put this in another way, so you can see I have this little notch here pointing to the back, your blade's not going to be able to go in. So if you're finding resistance as you're trying to insert your blade, don't force it. Just make sure that this notch is facing forward, and then you push it as far as it goes, and then to lock the blade in place, take this little dial and turn it clockwise. And when it's towards the right, that means your blade is now locked in place. So now let's take a quick look at the panel here with the buttons that are used to control your silhouette. Button on the far bottom is your power button. So once your machine is plugged in and plugged into your computer, you're going to need to turn that on. And then your screen's going to light up, your machine's going to make some little noises, and then you're going to see some words in the window. There's load cutting mat, which is the setting you're going to want when you are using the cutting mat. Now underneath that there's load media. So if you're not using the cutting mat, because you don't have to use it with this machine, when you're using some of the other materials like the vinyl that already have their backing, you would just put that in. It doesn't get attached to the mat. So if you're using something other than the cutting mat, you would use these directional arrows to move it downwards to load media. Now there's also this unload button at the bottom. Now this machine, as it cuts, it's controlled by your computer. If you're in the middle of a cut, and let's say you did not put your paper down properly on your cutting mat, and it started to raise, or there's something going wrong in your cut, you can hit the pause button, which you see down here on the bottom left, and then you would use your arrows to scroll down to unload, and then you would hit enter. So anytime you're moving up and down between these, you use your arrows to actually go ahead and load. We're then going to press enter. So I'm just going to show you how to now set up your cutting mat. So the last thing I want to talk to you about is the silhouette cutting mat. And this is the cutting mat that comes with the Cameo. It's the one that accommodates a full 12 by 12 sized piece of pattern paper. Now the cutting mat itself is out of a thick acetate type material that has a slightly adhesive coating on it which holds your paper in place. This blue sheet is a protective cover that's used to protect the adhesive that's on the cutting mat. Now you'll notice with this blue sheet that there's a very glossy side and then a not so glossy side. It's the very glossy side you want pointing downwards. Now when you're ready to use your cutting mat, you're going to peel this protective backing off and you're going to set that aside, but you don't want to throw that away because that's essential to prolonging the life of your mat. It's going to protect your mat against dust and other little particles in the air, because the more this gets dust and debris and things on it, the less the tack is going to hold your paper in place. Now that said, as you use this, you're going to start to notice you're going to get cut lines. Here, when I was pulling my piece off, I accidentally pulled off some of the adhesive on there. So what happens is that the more used up this gets, the less it's going to hold your paper in place. So as with the blades, I do recommend when you're purchasing your Cameo, it's always a good idea to purchase an extra cutting mat. Now if you look closely at the mat, you see there's an arrow here. This arrow you want to be pointing towards your silhouette machine. This is the direction in which this needs to get inserted into the machine. You're also going to notice that it has grid markings, and at 1-inch increments up to 12 inches and 12 inches. This reflects what you're going to see on your screen when you're getting ready to cut your design. What this allows is for you to do a piecework or patchwork of pattern papers and cardstocks, so that if you have a design that has multiple colors or elements, you don't have to cut it out one at a time and cut through full sheets of cardstock. You can utilize all your scraps, which is awesome. You just want to make sure that as you're placing your pieces on here, you look at the markings on your computer screen to help you place them. So for example, let's say I have a big box or a big card that I'm creating and I'm cutting it out of an 8.5 by 11. I'm going to take my 8.5 by 11 and I'm going to align it, the edges against the outer lines. And then of course once it's on, you make sure you press it down so it sticks to that adhesive that's on the mat. And then let's say I have a border that I want to cut out, and on my screen the border is placed in between the 9 and 10 inch line. I can then take my pattern paper and I can place it between the 9 and 10 inch line. And then the length of your paper, of course, depends on the length of your border. So as long as you've looked at your measurements and you have a scrap piece that's big enough, you're going to be fine. So as you can see, this mat is now all ready to be loaded into the machine. So you want to make sure you lift the lid of your machine. Your blue lever should be in the upright position. You want to make sure that you set your blade to the correct depth, and your computer screen, when you send it to Silhouette, it's going to tell you that based on the material you select. You want to make sure that your roller, this one here on the right, is as far as it can go, and this one should still be in its place. And then you're going to take your mat, arrow side pointing the machine. The left edge should align with this line here. Now when you look at your platform, you'll notice it has all sorts of lines on it. Long ones, there's a shorter one here about 1 inch in length, and that is going to denote the far left of your mat, and that's where you need to make sure that the left edge of your mat is aligned with that line like so. And that will make sure that it's centered in the rollers. You're then going to make sure that your machine and the dot is beside the load cutting mat, and then you're going to press enter, and you can see the machine feeds it in, and you're now ready to hit the print button on your computer and print your image. Now when you're finished and you need to unload your mat, the screen is just going to have an unload beside it. There's one there now, so if I change my mind, I wanted to change my design, add another pattern of paper, I could unload it, or when you're done you can unload it. I just press enter and you see my mat has now been unloaded. But as it's cutting, the mat's going to be going in and out of the machine, which is why you need to make sure you have enough space at the front and at the back of the machine. So there you have it. That's how you use your Silhouette Cameo. If you're interested in learning how to use the Silhouette Studio software, or if you'd like to see how to do your actual first print and cut from your computer to your machine, be sure to stop by the Paper Crafters Library. We have some free videos on that.